Former Chuck E. Cheese workers, what are some of the worst things to happen to you while working? One time at Chuck E. Cheese, when I was working there, some food fight broke out and one kid chucked his entire cake straight at Chucky and he cried about how he didn't get a cake. The kid's mom went into the bathroom and she was in there for a good 15 minutes. I went in there to ask what was up and I saw her having a mental breakdown. Turns out she spent hours making that cake special for him and it was all ruined in about 30 seconds. Story 2. I was the technician at a Chuck E. Cheese in high school. One day I was covering someone and I had to wear the suit and do the show. On my way back to the room, a little kid runs up to see Chuck E. and beat me in the ankle with a pencil as hard as he could. I rushed into the back room and took off the pants portion of the suit, pulled down my sock, and there was a big bruise. Didn't even go home early. Boss just had me stand at the door. Story 3. A little girl asked me if she could bop me on the nose. I nodded because I thought she would just tap the nose or whatever. She punched me so hard the nose caved in and I fell square on my ass. Getting hit in the suit sucks so bad, mostly because you can't do anything about it, but also because you've got 20% visibility, so you get sneak attacked by 6-year-olds all the damn time. Story 4. Didn't happen to me, but somebody beat by the knife. We actually hired a bouncer on our busiest days because we attracted the trashiest people. There was also a ton of sex in the Chucky closet. Story 5. Had a complaint that a kid was dipping toilet paper into a women's toilet, then eating it. He was. Same kid beat me mercilessly while I was wearing the rat and hat suit while screaming, "Man in suit." The best was a complaint about the same kid eating from other families' tables. He was, and he looked them dead in the eyes while doing it. These were all different days. Story 6. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese for a year in high school. It was the worst job I ever had. The absolute worst day was having to clean crap and vomit out of the sky tubes. 2 separate occasions, several hours apart. I've never been the same since. The funniest thing, though, was the co-workers who had a threesome in the closet where we kept the Chuck E. costume. Guy asked me cover for him during closing and took 2 other co-workers into the closet and sexed them. Thing is, there was a camera in that closet. That was the last time I ever saw all 3 of them. Story 7. Anytime a kid threw up in the ball pit was an especially horrible day. There were several instances during the 6 years I had worked there, but these times were quite memorable. There were 2 ways you could do this. 1. A large, both sides opened, cardboard box to cordon off the affected area, saying it was a slow day and other kids weren't splashing all the balls around. We had very large netting bags so that you could gather all the balls and take them outside and they would be sprayed off. Or 2. If the spew was all up in the ball pit, then all the damn balls had to be gathered, sprayed off, and the inside liner that held the balls had to be wiped down and cleaned. Only good thing about having to take out all the balls was that you could find some pretty good stuff that happened to be in people's pockets and fell out. Money, pocket knives, and even rings. In the 6 years I had worked there, I had never seen even a random cleaning schedule of the ball pit, dusting and shining with pledge the outside of it when a corporate type was coming. Oh yeah, definitely. I've worked at a water park too. If you want to talk about how nasty people can be, and the things they do and wear while swimming, even though it has enough chemical to water ratio, it still makes me not go to any water park, and it's been about 10 years since I've worked at one. Story 8. The worst part was wearing that rat suit. After this one dude was in it. He took it seriously and would get up on the prize tables and get the kids to chant, "Chucky, Chucky." I could hear it back in the kitchen over the noise and music. Dude was butt-ass naked in the suit. And he sweat a lot. I probably have hepatitis. Best part was taking the leftover pizza dough into the back lot after closing and having a 1v1 death match, throwing softball-sized dough balls at each other's heads. Story 9. I worked at a Chuck E. Cheese in high school in a wealthy area, so I got the bright idea to neatly fold and rip off the part of the bill that stated, "Tips are included in the cost." They weren't. I got my coworkers in on it. And eventually, we started presenting the bills to each other's parties and saying, if you'd like to tip your host, they can only accept cash, to plant the idea in the parent's head. One day, we got caught. I got blamed. I wasn't allowed to host parties anymore. Instead, the GM hired his family and friends and allowed them to abuse my system. It was a goldmine, because sometimes I would take home $200 in cash as a 16-year-old. I didn't even make that in 2 weekends of hourly pay. This happened in the state of California, where servers still make minimum wage, not some $2.13 bullcrap. I was originally offered around $8.50, but that was retracted, and I was paid $8.00 because I would receive tips, supposedly, which is what motivated me to beat the system. Story 10. Former employee of 9 months. 1. Very old woman peeing on the carpet in the entrance while standing up. 2. Cleaning pee out of the sky tubes after a complaint that it got in a kid's eyes and he couldn't see. 3. Walking into the bathroom to find an abandoned pair of underwear with poop in it. Took everything I had to not throw up when throwing it away. 4. While in the Chucky suit, being asked by a large man wearing all blue, "Why you got all that red on, huh?" 5. Asking a mute girl if she wanted to put her candles on her cake and being told she can't talk by her parents. There were definitely many more less than enjoyable experiences, but these are the ones that stand out to me. Story 11. Former manager checking in from like 15 years ago with a throwaway. I have a few worsts. I have divided them up below. Actual worst, the time a custody dispute carried into a birthday party for a 3-year-old. Multiple people had guns and knives. Someone actually shoot at the mother, and someone tried to beat with the knife the father. This caused a full-on riot, resulting in a lockdown. Luckily, we were very close to a police station and no one was seriously injured. Hilarious worst. 2 employees having sex in the Chuck E closet, where employees could go change without being in the way of the kitchen or in sight of the kids, while one was wearing the Chuck E head. This was bad because once the closet was unlocked, open, you were in sight. And we had lots of horrified parents and terrified children, and it was really hard to not laugh. Creepy worst. One of the animatronics failed and became possessed. We were about 2 weeks away from becoming a stage 2 store. Next level of upgrades, us improvements, including removing the animatronics. So they told us just to let it go and try to keep it in check. It sounded demonic and would turn on at random, like in the middle of the happy birthday song. Its head hit a point that it couldn't turn anymore and got stuck moving a few inches back and forth and then caught on fire while trying to demonically still sing. Sad worst. We all had to get background checks if we had not been employed for 30 days because a manager in our district, but not our store, turned out to not be taking care of his dying mother for a month. He was actually in jail for a DUI. The area manager was concerned about what else they didn't know because he had been with the company for like 25 years and worked up from a cashier. They ran a background check and he had multiple issues with the law. His family vacations were all timed with when he was in jail and was a registered offender. Story 12. I worked at my first job. On more than one occasion, kids went up to the sky netting, basically a bird nest made out of rope suspended in the air, and would take a crap. Naturally, since it was netting, the crap would fall through and on to anyone who happened to be below. After this happened a few times, we decided to move the carousel ride, which had a roof, under the bird nest, so at least it would land on the roof and not someone's head. Commenter? Kid I was training was leading me to a skyball machine he couldn't fix. He was probably 5 feet in front of me and walking under the net. All of a sudden, white stuff just falls and covers his head. Some little kid stuck his face through the netting and just puked down on him. I was set to go home right then and his shift had just started. My boss was going to make him stay since I was going home. I told him to go home and shower and ID stay on till he got back. Surprisingly, he actually come back. Story 13. Worked at CEC for nearly 2 years during high school and then again later for another year. The worst parts almost always had to do with the parents, of course. The one that sticks out in my head the most is the super drunk, very unattractive older woman who stuck her hands down the front of my pants. It was just after I started. I was 15 and spent the first few months there working the game room floor. This lady came up to me saying one of the machines was not giving out tickets and I needed to check it out for her. I sat down on the stool to open up the panel and check things out. During this time, she began rubbing my back saying how cute I was and how much of a help I was being. It was about this time I realized she reeked of booze and was drunk. Next thing I knew, one of her hands was down the front of my shorts, and she had found the prize she was after. I quickly sprang up from my seat, saying I had to get some tools from the back. I went and told the games manager what happened. I'm not really sure what happened after that as I stayed in the back for a while. Next time I came back out, she was gone, thankfully. As a whole, I look back at my time working there with fond memories. Our place was almost entirely staffed with high school or young college kids. Had a ton of great times there and the pizza kicked ass. But yes, cleaning crap out of the SkyTube sucks. The craziest thing that ever happened while I worked there. Next door to us was the DMV, and one day a lady parked in the fire lane in front it to help her elderly passenger inside to find a seat. Well, in the time it took her to do that, a tow truck swooped in to tow her. This happened fairly frequently in our parking lot, so my coworker buddy and I got closer to the glass at the front of the store to watch the shenanigans. The tow truck backed right up to the car, lifted the front end, and started pulling away with the it. As the towed car passed our windows, we realized there were kids in the back seat. My buddy and I ran out the front doors of the store and started chasing after the guy screaming about the kids. We finally caught up to him in the back of the parking lot where he would usually secure the car to the truck before taking it back to the lot and told him what he did. He just said, "Oh crap," dropped the car and took off. At this point, the mom of the kids had ran to where we were at, understandably screaming about her babies. The cops were called, and since we knew which company the truck belonged, the tow truck driver eventually showed back up. Not sure how much trouble the driver actually got in, but the cops were telling us that the law states that tow truck drivers must verify there are no passengers in the car before doing a snatch and grab. Adrenaline was definitely pumping with me and my coworker for a while after that one. Story 14. I worked at one for several years. I didn't have extremely horrible things happen to me, though. I was a game tech, which meant I would unclog tokens and perform minor repairs on games while also delivering pizza to tables and cleanup. Things I can remember that did happen that were weird, funny were: 1. Having to escort drunk people out of at closing. Cashiers would try to limit people's intake, but when others would buy for them, they could still get plastered. 2. Parents fighting over video games never had an issue with kids. It was always the parents wanting their little snowflakes to play on some game, usually skee-ball. We were told not to try and break them up. Manager would just call the cops. So I would go over to them and say they could either leave or deal with the cops. They always left before the cops arrived. 3. Got hit with skee balls a few times when going up on the lanes to unclog a ball or fix something. Nothing major, but it got to the point of making eye contact with all the kids before going up with warnings. I would throw them back. 4. Riding the drink trays down the slide at closing time and getting up to some impressive speeds and sliding across the floor. 5. Cleaning out the tubes that run around the ceiling and finding crap and puke and stuff up there. 6. Seeing how dirty the ball pit was? Seriously, don't let your kids go in there because they only get cleaned out like ever few months. And if some kid pisses unless we got told we didn't know. 7. Cleaning up the massive mess some people leave after doing their DIY party. Found dirty diapers and all kinds of mess under the tables that made me question how they can live with themselves after making such a massive mess and just leaving it. 8. Not me, but another person wearing the Chuck E. costume got groped by some MILF. Not that he complained, but I know that a few of the times it would be one of the female staff in the costume and could imaging it going down worse for the guest in that situation. 9. A tech replacing a broken cart in a game, and while lifting the tube electronics, holds it with the tube out and pressed against his thigh. It proceeds to discharge into his leg, leaving him in a fetal position, and me laughing so hard I had to close the door to the repair room to stop laughing. 10. For a while, I was emptying the tokens from all the games every Sunday. Would start out with clean nitrate gloves, and by the end of the day, they would be a dull gray gold color. I stopped trying to handle coins after doing gig and realizing how dirty most money is, especially stuff handled by those little walking waste dump children. Story 15. I have a good friend who used to work at Chuck E. Cheese. Him and his fellow coworkers conspired over the span of a few months to steal the various piece of the suit. This part got ripped, or some kid messed up this part and we had to throw it out until they had a full suit. For what reason, you ask? Literally just to take turns showing up to parties in the full suit to make a bunch of drunk people super stoked. Story 16. Not my story, but my dad's. This was decades ago. He worked as the man in the suit, and all his friends knew it. He had this one friend, we can call him Gene, who liked to take things over the top. He was working, and suddenly, my dad hears a roar. He turns to see his buddy Gene sprinting at him full speed, no stop in sight. Boom, my dad is on the ground. Head from the costume was off, and the only thing heard was the screams of young children. My dad got fired that day. His boss thought it was a planned prank on the company. As much as my dad denied it, he couldn't keep himself from laughing. My dad was a known prankster anyways, so he just accepted it. Story 17? This happened 15 years ago or so. I was designated to be the big cheese himself. A glorious honor. Haha. And the fact that I was one of the only guys that worked there, which meant I was almost always the chosen one for that hot-ass suit. This day, a football team was having a party there. 10 or 12-year-olds or something. My manager knew what was going to happen, me though. My young, naive brain only had innocent thoughts about making the children happy. Then the coach playfully tosses me a football, in my vision at least, so I actually caught it. It happened. A horde of 10-year-olds descended upon me in the cramped area between two long tables. Valiantly as I tried, these little demons proceeded to tackle me onto the ground. I thankfully didn't break anything while being knocked around, but I was pissed. As soon as they got off me, I got up and left to go to the back and take off the CCC outfit. Another time, the same manager as the last story made me work off the clock, but I was too young and dumb to document and report it. Story 18. Former employee, 6 months in high school. 1. A family racked up an approximately $300 bill and tried to pay for it with food stamps. 2. Two families got into a fight during their kid's birthday party and had to be escorted by the police out. I later found one of their weaves on the table. 3. I got kicked in the crotch while in the Chuck E. suit. I'm a girl and it still hurt. 4. A little girl asked me when the real Chuck E. was going to come out because I was too short to be the real Chuck E. 5. A mom wanted to show her kid that under the costume. It was just a real person and asked if I would take off Chuck E.'s cozium head to show her daughter. I did, and the kid got even more freaked out, thinking that the mouse had engulfed me. I've repressed a lot of the memories, but this is what I can remember. Story 19. I remember when I worked at that crap hole, I had to take out the coins out of the machines and refill the tickets and clean. Worst thing that happened was not the crap or vomit in the tubes above that the kids crawl in, but the time a kid apparently had to take a crap, but didn't want to go to the bathroom because he would lose all his progress. So he takes a crap right where he is standing, Guess he was 3 tokens deep, so he committed to the game. Well, at one point, he loses and runs out of tokens. Guess what he does next? If you guessed walk away with the crap on the floor like it wasn't his, you are wrong. He ducking grabs his crap and just smears it all over the machine like he is frosting a cake, full-on tantrums while trying to talk crap. Then just wipes their hands on the carpet. Glad I heard this from a coworker. Story 20. Having to wear that costume, it's probably one of the most degrading things I've ever had to do, having to clean the bathrooms. Watching children open up the containers with cheese and lick them and wonder how many times I've used condiments after children have licked them. Catching strep throat several times. Have a group of bored parents test the system of making sure the correct kid leaves with the correct parent. We don't usually check this because it would be obvious if you're taking a kid because the kid would be crying. That's usually when I would check, or if the kid didn't look like the parent. Have some lady accuse us of spraying Windex in the salad. Manager told us we couldn't take sick days unless we had a doctor's note, which is against the law. Manager would scream and degrade us, teenagers, in front of whoever. Having to close at the end of the night because we would basically be cleaning up after children. Having to deal with crafty parents. Having parents complain about our attitude because we don't want to be around their crafty kids. Having kids constantly running while you're trying to deliver a pizza. Wheelies. Having to clean the sky tubes after a kid crap in them. Having to work with teenagers who are not the nicest group of people. Mothers dropping their children's diapers on the floor instead of the trash can. I've blocked the rest out. Story 21. Not a former employee, but one time I saw 2 families going at it, throwing punches, cursing and spitting because one of the kids took some tickets from one of the arcade games that didn't belong to him. Cops had to be called and both dads got arrested. Story 22. Not the worst. Actually pretty good, depending on your perspective. My dad used to manage one back in the mid-'80s and would always go through the cash registers at the end of every night and trade in his own pocket change for all of the rare vintage coinage that teenagers would steal from their parents' stashes. He amassed a great collection of silver coins and other discontinued currency, mercury dimes, buffalo nickels, etc. He still has all of it to this day. Story 23. I've been at CEC for 4 years. I'm a cashier, and I remember I had a closing shift one night. Cashiers close down the cash area, salad bar, beverage bar, and restrooms, at least at my location. I usually leave the restrooms last, so on that night I had finished up everything else and went to clean restrooms. My location is typically very clean, so I had never had an issue with restrooms. Until that day. When I walked into the women's room, I saw what no employee wants to see in the restrooms. It was in the biggest stall. Just imagine poop, but everywhere. On the walls, on the seat, on the floor. It was like semi-solid, almost liquid-like. On the floor near the drain was more poop. Imagine the poop emoji, but in real life, that's what was there. I remember a coworker came in and Snapchatted it for some reason. I have no idea how a human could have accomplished this. I called my manager for backup. He came in and screamed. I screamed. We then cleaned it up begrudgingly. I wore like 5 pairs of gloves at the same time. It took us far longer than usual. I wasn't happy, to say the least. Luckily, it has never happened since. Nothing has ever been worse than that. Story 24. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese's for 5 years. I've seen a man smash a woman's face through a wall. He said she was on substances. For months after, we stacked booster seats in front of that wall to hide the hole. I've seen entire families climb on top of tables and hurl chairs, pizza, wings, and cake at other families. They stopped serving alcohol a few months before I started working there. People brought their own instead. We also occasionally found weed and needles in the bathroom. A little boy wandered behind me while I was standing at the cash register. It was super busy, so no one noticed him at first. Then I heard crying behind me and heard him sob, "I have to pee!" He pulled down his pants and pissed all over the floor directly next to me. When I was in the suit, which is what we called the costume, a kid flying squirreled himself onto my back and would not get off. Visibility is very low in that thing. I ended up scraping him off on a table and running to the Chucky room. Also, in the suit once, a kid noticed that I had boobs. The suit was sort of a fat suit, but you could clock that the creature within was not a male, and kept grabbing and poking my boobs, screaming, "Chucky has boobs!" There was a shooting at a business that was nearby, and the news said that the shooter was still on the loose. We had to lock down the entire store. I was terrified. They found the guy had took his life away after killing his girlfriend, and at least one other woman, and had never left the original site of the shooting. Now for my favorite insane story. I was working the prize counter. There was a raging sea of bodies filling the entire store. I hear screaming. These weren't the joyful screams of children. These were the terrified screams of adult women. I noticed people were pointing up in the direction of the tubes. One of the tubes was clear, but it wasn't clear anymore. It was filled with red liquid. There was a toddler. It turns out his nose was bleeding and he was laughing. I found a raccoon in the dumpster. I built it a staircase out of empty soda syrup boxes so it could get out. Story 25. I worked there for only 4 months in high school before I quit. Everyone was required to wear the mouse costume. Kids would literally beat you up to get your attention. It sucked because I went to a Catholic high school where we wore uniform skirts. Every Monday morning, I would go to school covered in bruises. Story 26. I have a Chuck E. Cheese story. I was about 8 and being a goof. I saw the Chuck E. Cheese guy in costume and we were playing. I gave him a playful little kick in the shin while giggling. Well, he played along and gave me a light little tap in my shin with his shoe. But it wasn't a shoe. It was like a big, solid, rubber, cartoony brick of rubber. He didn't mean to hurt me at all, but just that little tap bruised the FK out of my leg. Story 27. That damn suit. I was a game room tech. That part was awesome. I got to play games all day, fix coin jams, etc. However, one day before I was allowed to leave, they decided I had to wear the suit. This was 10 years ago, so it was before the redesign of Chuck E. Cheese. I'm 6 feet, and with the suit on, ears included, I was a giant. You can't really see in the damn thing. Anyway, they lead me out into the main area, and I'm basically lumbering around. It's this horrible experience because I couldn't see. I kept bumping into things. You'd think this would be the worst part. Nope, it was the kids I scared. They counted. I made 7 children scream and bawl their eyes out. I felt like crap for it. Wasn't much I could do, though. It got better. I finally get to take the suit off and leave. I'm walking to my car, and this family is leaving. The little boy is crying. I figured it was due to having to leave. Nah, he's upset because Chuck E. Cheese terrified him. The mom goes, "I've had it. You need to straighten up already. If you don't, I'll take you back in and feed you to that giant mouse." Worst experience. Another time, we had these sketchy fellows come in and try and rob us right before close. Our manager, let's call him O, decided he wasn't going to call the cops and would handle it himself. So he runs back to the kitchen and grabs the pizza cutter. Basically, it's a giant curved machete. He's trying to be all sneaky, kind of hide it by keeping it close to his leg. We all thought we were about to get shot because he wanted to play hero. The guys ended up fleeing, after seeing him with a giant blade. But it was a pretty terrifying experience for a young high school kid. Story 28. Oh boy, finally one I can answer. I'm currently a manager at CC and have been there for a total of 3 years and counting, so I have tons of fun stories. But my favorite to tell, the least favorite to deal with, was what we refer to as the vomit incident. It was my 3rd month there and I was restocking the salad bar when a lady comes up to me and says that her 12-year-old son threw up in the girls' bathroom. Shortly after telling us this, they book it out of the building. Now that should have been a warning there, but I didn't think anything of it. So being the good employee I was, I offered to clean it up, expecting it to be just a small bit around a toilet or something like that. So I grabbed the semolina, the powdery stuff we use to gold up the vomit and make it more solid, and a broom to start taking care of it. However, upon approaching the soda machine near the bathrooms, I was hit with a wall of one of the most ungodly smells I have come in contact with. That should have been warning too, but I proceeded into the bathroom anyway. As soon as I opened the door, I saw it. This was no minor spill. Oh no, this was a whole new level of puke. The stall the kid threw up in was covered entirely in vomit. The entire toilet, the floor, even the damn stall walls. Nowhere was safe from what appeared to have been these kids' vigorous projectile vomiting. The worst part is that out of the 3 stalls he could have defiled, he chose the middle one, causing it to ooze into the other 2 stalls from under the dividers. Now, me being the good-natured, never-talk-back newbie that I was, and frankly in a dumb moment of pure shock, decided the best course of action was to sprinkle the powder and start sweeping, while trying my hardest not to add to the chunky orange swamp coating the stall. So many mothers with their kids tried to come in to use the bathroom, and immediately turned right back around. After about 15 minutes of getting nowhere, I finally shuffled out to find a manager to inform them of the mess. We wound up having to close off both bathrooms due to the horrible smell from the puke pit spreading, and bringing out our heavy-duty cleaning machine to just completely deep clean the bathroom. But hey, my manager gave me a free pizza out of it, so I guess it wasn't all bad. Had some doozies like getting cornered and beat up by kids while I was Chucky. While my general manager at the time watched and did nothing, having to clean pee out of the sky tubes, playground bolted to the ceiling, that was dripping from a crack onto the floor below, and countless more. Not to mention all the crafty entitled guests coupled with our recent alcohol additions. But my coworkers here are chill, and I get free pizza, and I get fun stories. So I guess at the end of the day, it's worth it. Story 29. Not an employee, but one time as a very young kid, my older brother almost got lured out of the building by a stranger with the promise of a bunch of free tickets. I intervened, and everything was fine. Employees were notified. Another time, he almost got into a truck to help find a missing puppy. He was a very kidnappable kid, I guess, but I can't seem to get rid of his dumb ass. Story 30. I was 17. It was New Year's Eve. I had plans for midnight, and I was getting out of work at 10. It was getting close to 10, and I was working the kid check near the ball pit. It was pretty slow, since most had left early to go and ring in the new year. There were still a few families sitting at the tables by the ball pit. I was watching the kids play and noticed two kids throwing balls out of the pit. Those things take forever to round up. I walked over there and told the kids to stop throwing the balls out. The little craps wouldn't listen, so I turned to the parents sitting in the booth who didn't even notice. I told the parents to make them stop, and they started yelling at me for assuming those kids were theirs. Now, to be fair, they were the only family there of their race. But what she doesn't remember is that I was the one who checked them. Before I could respond to her, a father at the table behind them started yelling at the family that was getting angry with me. Next thing I knew, it was group brawl. From all direction, parents were snatching up their crying kids, and they ran for it. Arms and knees are flying, and I'm trying to get out of the area without getting hit. That's when I saw the woman next to me pick up the metal napkin holder. She swung it, almost hitting me, and smacked a man with it. Great. She goes to swing again, and another person had grabbed a dispenser of their own and swung just in time to hit the other woman's dispenser. So now those two were going at it, while the guy who got hit made his way to our office. I ran back there with them, and police were already on their way. The fight started to spill into the main entrance front counter area, and one of the brawlers wanted to go into the back to fight the guy who just got smacked. My boss finally yelled that the police had been called, and they were on the way. All the families involved in the fight couldn't get out of there fast enough. We did get the plate number of the woman who hit the man. The police showed up and questioned everyone who stayed behind after the fight. It took forever. I spoke to an officer and gave a written statement. The man was taken to the hospital, and after EMT cleaned him up, it looked a lot better than it did before. Finally, I got the okay from the police to leave. It was just before midnight, and there was still a chance that I could make it to my friends in time. I walked in with 2 minutes to spare. It was a crazy way to end the year, that's for sure. Not long after that, I moved out of state. Story 31. I worked at one for a couple of years, and one thing that has to be stated is that there is difference in quality from a franchise. Ball pits hadn't been a part of Chuck E. Cheese for almost 20 years when I worked there, so I never had to deal with that. In general, though, our cleaning was really thorough every night. Being honest, my time working there was probably one of the most rewarding jobs I've had. Maybe because the customer base was really good, but tips were awesome, as some said. Working as a high schooler and getting $200 to $300 a day based on parties was great. The manager was a veteran who hired well and believed in kick as parties over profit. So he would be handing out tickets, tokens, and food for free at intervals. But you want bad stuff. Well, it didn't happen to me, but my coworker. He was hosting a party, and one of the boys in the party wasn't feeling well. He went to the bathroom and came out a few minutes later with his pants down crying. There was an accident. The manager on duty didn't want to deal with it, so he asked the party host to deal with it. He even offered to let the host go home early with a full day's pay if he did. So what happened? Well, I guess the kid sat on the toilet to ease his pain and started to release a rather liquid mess. All of a sudden, the smell caused him to vomit, so he quickly jumped off the toilet to vomit in the toilet. Then he realized that he hadn't stopped the initial release. So he turns around to continue that. But now the sight and smell of the yellow-brown mixture on the floors and walls made him throw up again. After wallowing in the mess for a bit, he trudged out crying. Now the best part was yet to come. I was working all day, so I shrugged it off. The cleaning crew did a great job sanitizing and cleaning up so that no one would know of the horror that had befallen the stall. We forgot to tell the night crew about it, so as we were closing, one of the guys and the closing manager were throwing the garbage out. As they were throwing the bags into the dumpster, I guess one of the bags snagged the corner of the dumpster and ripped open, releasing its treasure inside. Giving it all day to stew together in a bag made it so nasty that the worker who tossed it got a full whiff and threw up immediately. I only learned of the incident as the closing manager ran into the restaurant and straight into the manager's bathroom to throw up himself for a bit. Hilarious for me, though. Story 32. I wore the mouse suit once while working during high school. I was surrounded by an intimidating gang of 10-year-old boys who cornered me by the basketball game. They stomped on my tail and tried to look through my eye holes and yelled, "Chuck E. Cheese isn't real!" while trying to identify me. I never wore that damn suit again. Damned elementary schoolers traumatized me for life. Story 33. I worked at one during high school. It was awesome. We had the old animatronics and a ball pit and horny coworkers. One time, a portly young child who exceeded the age range for our single-seat Ferris wheel got her arm stuck behind the seat. "The machine stopped," she cried. "The fire department came. We applied more butter and she was eventually freed. Oh, worst. Sorry, that was the best." The worst was when my ex's new BF called me on the store's number and threatened to beat me up in the parking lot. That sucked. Everything else was awesome. I heard Beck's "loser" for the first time ever in that CEC kitchen. Story 34. Not an employee, but a customer. 6-year-old me was running around when I noticed this kid, maybe 4 years old, sitting up against one of the arcade machines, looking dazed and like he had been crying for a while. I get a closer look and see he has a big wound forehead. I'm talking like wound-wide hole. I remember panicking and asking where his parents were. He just sat there slack-jawed, and I freaked out. I picked him up best I could and took him to our table. My parents were like, "Why did you bring this child over?" Oh man. Employees were summoned, and they took the kid to find his parents. To this day, I have no idea what happened to cause that to the kid. I'm assuming he was running around like me and must have run into a corner somewhere. Hard. Story 35. I was actually a patron, not a worker. My sister and her family went to a Chuck E. Cheese, and my wife and kids met them there. I had to go to work for a meeting, but I would drive there and meet everyone afterwards. I pull up to the parking lot and see 2 cop cars out front. A man was standing outside with a present, but the 2 cops were barring him entry. A kid is being dragged inside by what I presume was his stepdad and mom, all the while screaming, "Daddy! Daddy!" to the man outside. The man with the present was screaming at the cops and his wife. A man can't see his son on his birthday? It's taking ages to pull this kid back in, and the man is just repeating and now begging to give his son the present. I'm still by my car waiting for the scene to clear. Eventually, the kid is inside. The cops get the man to leave, though he looked thoroughly crushed. And I go inside to witness a kid's worst birthday party. I did, however, score a bunch of tickets for my daughter and my nieces so they could get some crafty prizes. Story 36. I was a party hostess for a year and a half, so I have plenty. Some were just general situations. 1. A kid pooed in the sky crawl slide and another poor kid slid through it and spread it all the way down the slide. My manager told me to meet him by the sky crawl with no context and then picked me up and shoved me into the entrance with some Windex and paper towels. I had to scale down the slide with paper towels on my butt. 2. While cutting cake for a 3YO party, some kids started rubbing my back. I thought, oh, that's sweet, until I went to the kitchen and my boss told me I had cake all over my back. I had to work 5 more hours like that. 3. An adult man followed me around for hours trying to get my number until my manager had to tell him to leave or he was going to call the cops for harassment. The guy looked me in the eye and said, "This isn't over." I watched him lingering in the parking lot for a bit after. 4. There was a guy that was a regular to Chuck E. He would bring in a lot of different children. We just assumed that he had a lot of kids. One day, the cops come in with his picture and asked us if seen him. He was an offender. 5. A father and a 17-year-old son run into Chuck E. Cheese with bags, hopped over the kid check rope and ran to the back. Cops came barging in right after and chased them around the game room with tasers out before tackling to the ground. 6. IDK what the pizza was, but it did some terrible things to people's stomachs. One morning, the toilet in the men's bathroom was clogged. My manager brought in the wet bag vacuum and stuck the hose in to such the clog out. The vacuum was on blow, and when he turned it on, it blew crap all over him, me and my coworkers. The ceiling, stalls, floor. It was everywhere. Story 37. I can actually answer this one. The amount of kids that put Jell-O in their mouths, then spit it back out at the salad bar is incredible. It's also not uncommon for a kid to throw up in the sky tubes or pee down a slide. But the best one I saw during my time, there was a girl maybe 4 years old, eat her body weight in pizza and soda, then run around for an hour. At one point, she got very pale and puked more than I've seen any grown man puke in my life. Her mom picked her up and started sprinting to the bathroom like an Alabama running back. The girl just kept puking and left a decent trail the entire route to the bathroom. 10/10ths would watch again. Story 38. I grew up in a small city. Many years ago, I worked at a place like Chuck E. Cheese's. Dodging go-karts and cleaning up child puke was terrible. I very passively met a wonderful person. Neither of us realized how important it was. It's about 8 years later. We are getting married in 3 weeks. As terrible as it was, best thing I could have done. Story 39. Yes. Finally somewhere to dump my Chuck E. Cheese stories for delicious internet points. Grandpa goes up into sky tubes to find grandchild. Children start coming down saying that there was an old man sleeping in sky tubes. Coworker goes up. Dude is straight cardiac arrested. Have to close the restaurant to allow paramedics into sky tubes. He didn't make it. We had this obese couple come in every once in a while who would order a pizza and then sit in one of the booths and make out aggressively between bites of pizza. We found substances in the women's bathroom 3 separate times. Not much of a story, but for some reason moms had a hard time holding on to their substances bags. We had this one guy come in, drop his kids off, and then leave to go to a bar down the strip mall. He would proceed to come back every hour to check on his kids, becoming visibly more drunk each time. Story 40. I was a manager for CEC back in the late 90s and had a fight break out between 2 women, which then escalated to family members getting involved. One of the women yelled at the other, "I'm going to get the rest of my family and getting my gun too." I called the cops and waited outside for her and the rest of the family to show up to stop what could have been a very bad situation. Cops took 90 minutes to get here, despite my pleas that there could be a mass shooting and kids could be the victims. Fortunately, she never came back in or other family members showed up. I had another fight break out 3 weeks later and called the cops again and again, took over an hour to show. 2 weeks after that, a drunk ex-husband came in and ruined his kid's party by smashing the ex-wife face into the cake and beat her. This time I used the panic button on the alarm system and cops showed up in 2 minutes. They pulled their guns on the guy and held him for 15 minutes until they realized it wasn't a robbery they were called out for and let him go. They charged me with causing a riot for using the panic button incorrectly, and the company's lawyers had to get involved to have the charges dropped on me. Charges were dropped, and I ripped them a new a-hole. Should have sued them, by CEC said no. Story 41. Not a former employee, but I had something weird happen to me when I was a kid at a Chuck E. Cheese. Was at a birthday party for someone, and the guy in a Chuck E. Rat mascot suit came out to sing happy birthday or whatever. After things died down, I vividly remember him coming over to me. He proceeded to pick me up and carry me towards the door. I was only about 5, 6, so I had no idea what was going on or how to react. He carried me all the way outside, set me down, then went back inside. I stood there for a few minutes, like dazed, then eventually went back inside. I was super ducking confused and didn't know what to do. So I just found the kid's mom and asked her to call my parents because I wanted to leave. Didn't ever tell anyone about what happened because I didn't even understand it myself, and still don't to this day. Story 42. Technically my first job ever. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese for a grand total of 2 hours around the time I was 16. Went for orientation and never came back, not even to collect my check. I had a brief interview and was hired on the spot. Was told to purchase the uniform and wear it to orientation the following week. Not sure if it's changed, but at that time the uniform was ridiculous. Hawaiian shirt, navy pleated shorts, white socks, and white shoes. So I show up to orientation the following week in full uniform, expecting to meet others dressed the same. Instead, it's 2 guys about my age in street clothes. As soon as I walk in, one of them covers his mouth to stifle laughter and taps the other guy next to him to get his attention, then points at me. These 2 laugh at me pretty much the entire time as the asshole manager drones on about pizza toppings. To add insult to injury, had to have my mom pick me up because my car was in the shop. Told her I was never going back. Damn those guys. Story 43. Was forcibly made out with in the Chuck E. Cheese costume. During Valentine's Day, I was in working while my manager said, "Hey, Mr. Cuban Bear, there's a girl who wants to meet Chuck E., so go put on the suit." After I put it on and came back out, a girl who was about 19 years old walked up to me with her mom. She was mentally challenged, so I didn't really know what to do. She handed me a box of chocolate and a card and said, "I love you, Chuck E.," which I thought was sweet. We took some photos, and then I went in to hug the girl, and she straight up starts making out with the Chuck E. costume. And I'm not talking about pecking. I'm talking like full on this girl was using tongue and everything. Her mom eventually pulled her off of me, and I said bye and changed the duck out of that costume. I sat down my chocolate and told my story to my coworkers and boss. I went back to work. Once my shift was over, I went to the back to get my chocolate after having to deal with all of this, and my fat-ass manager ate it all, using the excuse, "Well, it was meant for all of us." Damn you, Larry. Story 44. Worked at one for over 6 years. One night near closing, a family comes in and says it's one of the kids' B-Day. So this meant Mr. Cheese had to make an appearance and the crew would sing happy birthday to the family. The guy that normally did the suit was gone for the night, and since I had done it before I volunteered. On this night, a couple of my friends were giving me a ride to a party after work, so I'm out there doing my thing, and I look over and see my friends sitting in a booth and pointing and laughing. Manager told them I was in the suit. I get done, and while I'm walking to the back to change, I stop by friends. And after a quick glance around, I say to them, "Here's a message from Chuck." Then I proceed to grab my penis with one hand and give them the middle finger with the other. Immediately I hear, "Oh man." I turn around to see a mom with her jaw on the floor and look down at my feet and see 2 small children staring right at me. That costume head was not the easiest to see out of. 2 things happened afterwards. That family got free stuff and I was never allowed to wear the suit again. Story 45. I scheduled an interview with my local Chuck E. Cheese for a part-time job. I showed up to the interview 10 minutes early. I very quickly met the manager that was supposed to do the interview. Don't even get the chance to shake hands before she says that she has a conference call and will be back for the interview in 10 minutes. Okay, you know what happens. So I get told to have a seat and wait at the main booths. This is on like a Thursday afternoon, so it's not very busy. Maybe 1 or 2 families. I end up sitting there for 3 hours in a nice shirt and outfit with no update or being asked if I could reschedule. So I tell the ticket counter worker that I've been waiting for 3 hours and she doesn't know what to say. I said that if still wanted to give the interview, I would call them. She said that was understandable and that she would pass what I said on. Ticket counter girl was nice like an hour and a half in and gave me a soda cup though. Reported the interview and never found out what happened. Story 46. Being a game room attendant and being accused during a meeting by someone who I thought I was close with, that I was going slow on purpose for more hours. Yet I truly didn't want to stay there longer. Then I needed to, and yet literally none of the managers did my work, yet all acted like they knew what it's like to do all the work that game attendants do. I worked for them for 2 years, and rather than promote me after getting Employee of the Month several times, they decided to fly someone from Texas rather than promote me. Horrible job. Story 47. Had a friend who worked there who had a nice little racket going. He would always volunteer to work the prize counter, which for some reason, nobody wanted to work. What he would do is when the kids came up to the counter to turn in their tickets, he would ask them what prize they wanted, and a lot of times they would pick something that was worth more than the tickets they had. So my friend would turn to the parents and offer them a discount rate, usually $5 or $10, which the parents accepted as it got them out of there, and they just would have spent that money on tokens anyway. My friend would make a nice chunk of change after a busy weekend working the counter. Story 48. I used to sit, in costume, on a bench right outside the door. I crossed my legs and put my arm on the back of the bench and sit perfectly still like a statue. As people walked in, they'd inevitably come over for a picture or to get a better look. And right as they got close, I would come to life really fast to scare them. The kids would usually startle, but then everyone would laugh. One time I was doing it, and a kid did not want to come sit by me. His parents kept urging him. He got close enough and I came to life and he freaked out. So much so that he wouldn't go in the restaurant. For his own birthday party, it turns out. His mom took him home and his dad stood at the door and told arriving family and friends that the party was canceled because Chucky scared the hell out of the birthday boy. The parents were really cool about it, but I felt like such an asshole. Story 49. Oh boy, finally something I can answer. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese from 14, 16. So many good memories with the people I worked with, but also so many negative interactions with kids and parents. My favorite one is, I was in the Chucky suit and we were putting on the birthday show dance. At one point, we had our arms on each other's shoulders and kicked out our legs. Don't know what this is called. After the left leg, we switched to the right leg, and as my leg went full force soccer kick, I felt it hit something. Due to tunnel vision in the helmet, I didn't see right away, so I went on as usual. Parents started screaming and there was crying. Turns out a little boy was running towards Chucky for a hug, arms spread chin up, and took that size 15 moon boot right to the jaw. He went flying and was out cold. I was rushed off into the back and told what had happened. We must have watched it 200 times on the camera. Manager had to comp the whole birthday package. Story 50. Not an employee, but as a child, I had this weird feeling that the people working there were different. Now, 15 years later, and not in the key demographic I understand, I saw the light leaving their eyes on the rare occasion that I would look at an employee. They were slowly dying inside from the constant screaming of small children all day, and I was too young to understand their pain. Also, my Tier 1 jackass uncle, who has been in San Quentin multiple times and is going back soon, trapped me in the tubes multiple times when I was 4 or 5. He was in the tubes in his mid-20s. For so long, I started crying. So I may have made an employee's day horrible by being a kid, screaming and bawling for his mommy because he was trapped in a plastic tube, 15 feet in the air with no way out because his uncle knows his every move in that damn container. Overall, Chuck E. Story 51. I knew a guy in high school who was Chuck E. Cheese. He always high on the job. He hated kids. And if they were annoying, he would bat at them and make it look like an accident. Story 52. I did not work for them, but I worked for a company that filled their CO2 tanks for the soda fountain. During the week of spring break, naturally, every frazzled parent had brought their ankle biters to the Chuck's house. I could hear the yelling and screaming outside the building. Anyway, I'm back in the storage area inspecting the tank before filling it, and one of the waitresses, cute, early 20s, storms back into the break room, sees me there and says something to the effect of, "Damn it!" strips down to a bra and thong and throws on a shirt and pants and walks out the back door. A fine how do you do, if you ask me. Story 53. This has nothing to do with working there. But when I was little, maybe around the age of 10, this young guy in a suit was sitting on the edge of a highway with a brand new red sports car. This was a very long time ago, before cell phones. But it was like a car that costs well beyond the 100K mark. So my dad picks him up, and it turns out he was the Chuck E. Cheese CEO's son. We took him to the nearest restaurant so he could make a call. He got us a complete day free of Chuck E. Cheese's of anything we wanted. As a little kid, I was ecstatic. That was the only time we ever picked up a hitchhiker, and it was worth it. Story 54. Worked at CEC when I graduated high school for a whopping 6 months. I had a woman yell at me because there were not enough chicken wings in her basket, even though we went by a weight, not a count. I also had a parent yell at me 5 mins after ordering because they wanted their pizza. We had people waiting to get in because we were at the fire code limit. One time, I found a pair of men's underwear by the merch counter. I also found countless diapers left on tables. We have changing tables FFs, and underwear left on the bathroom floors. Also, countless days being left at kid check without a break. Had to have a cashier cover me to quickly pee and refill my cup. And so much pee in the sky tubes. Also hookups in the Chucky closet. I just remembered how creepy dads would hit on me in front of their children. Story 55. Worked there a whopping 2 weeks about 18 years ago. I was in the freezer and a guy walked in and grabbed my boobs and tried making out with me. I told my manager I wasn't going back in the freezer. She said that means I'm quitting and that I can't pick up my paycheck until my hat and shirt are turned in. So I took my shirt off in front of everyone that was working, we were closed by then, and threw the shirt and hat at her and told her, "Here, take it now so I don't forget it." She tried withholding my paycheck anyway, trying to claim my register was short for the exact amount of my check, and asked me to sign the check over to her to cover it. My mom had to go there with me to get my check. Damn that place. Story 56. Different story worth telling. I just transferred to a new store and found out quickly that everyone was stealing. I mean, everyone. Apparently, the GM had broken her leg in a skiing accident and left her sister in charge for a few months. Sister had a vicious weed habit and decided to siphon money out of everyone's paychecks to stay afloat. Once they found out, employees tried getting corporate involved, but the institution just dragged ass, leaving them without a solution for months. So they just started stalking everything. One got bought a $1,000 engagement ring just selling bricks of tickets to customers. Another guy had his apartment decorated with all the high-end prizes. It was wild. Even the good kids were taking what they could. By the time I started working there, this had been going on for about 2 months. Damn San Bernardino. Story 57. I was wearing the suit during a birthday party and had just finished doing the hokey pokey. I'd been wearing the suit for about 3 hours at this point because we were crazy busy, and those suckers are hot. I was sweating, dizzy from the heat, and I was finally given the go-ahead to go and change back into my uniform and take the kid check over again. The birthday boy took offense at this and ran after me, tackling me hard. My balance was already messed up from being dizzy, and this put me over the edge, so I went flying. The head of the suit flew off, and I slammed my face into a table. My nose was broken, children were traumatized, and I got fired a couple of days later, with the store manager claiming it was because I was not doing my job well enough. Story 58. In the Chuck E. Cheese in my town, there was, I believe, a middle school youth group that had a night there. A kid was in the ball pit, completely covered by the balls. He was positioned at the end of the slide when another kid came down and accidentally slid into him feet first. It broke the kid's neck. Story 59. Around 2004 or so, we got robbed after closing. I had just made a pizza for myself, walked out of the kitchen with it, was grabbed by some masked strangers, and watched in horror as my pizza box opened and my pie fell face down on the ground. It took 10 seconds or so to register the semi-automatic weapons in their hands. Despite duct taping us and forcing us face down on the ground, the assailants were rather nice. One of them tried to grab my floor pizza before fleeing. Story 60. Naive, 16-year-old me didn't comprehend that what my manager was saying to me was harassment. Then his girlfriend showed up one day and she looked even younger than I was. It was really creepy once I was older and knew what was going on. Other than that, the kids who would try to beat me while in the rat costume. We were told that if a kid hit or kicked us, we could grab them by the wrist rather firmly to send a message, but I don't know if that was just my location or not. This was in 1997 or so. Story 61. Former employee. How come no one has talked about the insanity that was working in the kitchen? On busy days, I was cemented by the 400-degree oven, would clock in with the sun up, and wouldn't see outside again until it was pitch black. We also had to draw straws over who would be Chucky. Only worked there for 9 months, my junior year of high school. Story 62. I almost got the position of manager at Chuck E. Cheese once. Applied online, phone interview went well. They told me to come in on a certain day for the official interview. Well, I arrive, and nobody has any clue why I'm there or who is supposed to be interviewing me. Turns out the current general manager is out of the state on business, pizza business, and spaced the interview. He asked if I could come back the next week. I said sure, then never came back El Mao. Story 63. At the local Chuck E. Cheese, a child ran off across the parking lot unsupervised, where it was hit by a truck. The parents sued the Chuck E. Cheese, and they ended up settling out of court. Here's a quote from the parent. Every parent knows that you can't keep your eye on your kids all the time, as hard as you try. As a parent myself, her negligence and her ability to subsequently successfully blame someone else. This has always really bothered me. Story 64. Had a fistfight break out between the mother of the birthday child and one of their guests' family members. That's one birthday that kid won't forget. Story 65. My daughter was Chuck E. for special events and threw in the towel after one teen customer wouldn't stop groping her to see if she was a girl. Adults were nearby laughing. Story 66. I snuck into the supply closet on my break and started sucking helium directly from the tank. Next thing I know, I'm waking up on the floor. No idea how long I was passed out. I was 17. Story 67. Ghetto fights and general ghetto people. I've been maced trying to break up a fight over a handful of, they're worth a penny each BTW. Most people wouldn't expect it, but the kids are quite pleasant. There are very few problems they come to you with that can't be resolved with a token or 5 tickets. On top of that, when you troll a kid or give them a hard time, they laugh. The adults, however, are bitter, exhausted, fed-up people who would rather be at a club than buying tokens for their kid. Story 68. Consistently got out of work at 2 a.m. when I was still in high school and had school in the morning. Got yelled at for not making the food fast enough. Got yelled at for messing an order up when it was really my manager's fault. He didn't apologize. Had to escort homeless men out of the bathrooms because they scared the kids. Consistently understaffed. I'll probably think of more. Story 69? Or the poop. Don't forget the poop. I was an assistant manager, and that was an every Sunday thing. The horror in our hostess's eyes when ball pit cleaning day came up, as if they had been kidnapped. We had mesh bags, luckily. Can't imagine ball pit day without the mesh bags? Ha 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 ha. Story 70. There was a birthday kid who was 6 and he decided to get up and dance with the animatronics. Late 80s. He tore the heads animatronics off each one and threw them into the audience. Mom and Dad were not happy with their bill. Story 71. Place very similar, but not Chuck E. Cheese. Kids managed to puke down the 20-foot slide. I then had to rig up a belay system to lower myself down the slide to clean it. The rope system broke and I ended up cleaning the slide with my clothes.